Disclaimer. The information and education material contained herein is meant to promote the general understanding and dialogue of GAN's processing. Such information is not meant or intended to serve as a substitute for a healthcare professional's clinical training, experience, or judgment. For patients and individuals, such information is not to be a substitute for professional medical, therapeutic, or healthcare advice or counseling. For medical issues or concerns, including decisions about medications and other treatments, readers, viewers, listeners should always consult their physician or, in serious cases, seek immediate assistance from emergency personnel. Prescription information, procedures, and use of medical devices information should be undertaken only by properly trained and certified medical personnel. We specifically disclaim any warranties, express or implied, including implied warranties of merchantability or fitness for a particular purpose. Such information is provided, as is, and is believed to be accurate at the time of its publishing, but it is the viewer's job to evaluate the accuracy of any information found in this presentation. Every case presented is of their own experience, applied by themselves for themselves, and it applies to their case only. Every person experiencing health problems should seek professional medical advice and consult their course of treatment with a doctor. The processes of plasma balancing described herein are a natural process which supports the body but does not replace medical advice or therapies one is already subject to.
Alex, I muted your mic. Okay, you've reopened it. Thank you. And now let's welcome Alex as he's prepared another teaching on a new system, maybe new information. I don't know what he has lined up for us today, but it's always exciting, provocative, and helping us to explore more of this world of the plasma and the matter state. So thank you, Alex, for joining us today. And please take the screen. I see you have. And we're just waiting for your screen sharing to come through. I'm just seeing you've started the screen sharing. We're just waiting for it to come through. So thank you again. Beautiful video that was created there. Again, it's beyond the imagination of most dentists that a tooth can be regrown. But in those pictures, we've certainly seen how the enamel is actually growing around the tooth that was decayed. And as Mr. Kesh said, we don't know if a full tooth will be grown or a partial tooth. But again, it's all developing this for apps later on. I would imagine there'll be a dental app, won't there? Alex, are you able to hear me? I see your mic is open. Your screen sharing is still waiting to come through. It does say you are sharing the screen, but we don't see a picture yet, and we're not hearing your voice. Check your volume, perhaps. I know you said you had started to set up a new system. Okay, I think Alex has dropped out. Let me take the screen back just for a moment. And let's let Alex come back in. I think he's just coming in. Alex? See, while we're waiting for Alex to join us, I was wondering, I see Misty, you're here. And I had gotten a message from you last week, but apparently that wasn't actually you. I had talked to and she had gotten a very similar message about needing help. Was that you, Misty, if you're near your microphone?
I'm here, and that was not me. Somebody had taken over my account. Yes, and I can't seem to get back into it, so ignore me. And I can't shut it down. I sent messages and can't get a response, unfortunately.
There's some way, I think Ying, maybe you want to contact Ying. Her account was compromised and she was able to reset it up. But yes, a message came in, are you free? I said yes, and then it said, could you do me a favor? And I said perhaps, and then they said something else, and I said this sounds like a hack, bye-bye. And then I got a smiley face and the whole thing shut down and disappeared. So I was aware of that, but yeah, apparently there's some people trying to get into other people's accounts and cause little disturbances in the background and so on. But there is a way to get back in it. Perhaps Ed knows, or I know Ying was able to reestablish, but it's, again, it causes a lot of irritation, but I'm glad I avoided that. But I was saying,
I'm glad you did too, because the person speaking to the other people, because I had multiple calls from people and they were like, what's going on? And they were being very rude to them and they knew it wasn't me. So
right. Yeah, so just to let everyone know and be aware that there are people who want to cause interference in the background. As Mr. Kesh said, with the government of Belgium, they're still hard at work in it. We're not afraid of it. And Mr. Kesh said we've moved on from the Belgians, which will get absorbed back from where they came from, I guess, wherever that would be, part of Europe or so on. But yeah, I wanted to ask you, but I wasn't sure. At first I thought it was, but then I said, gee, I haven't heard from Misty in a while. And this sounds like one of those situations. So maybe the soul informed me, be careful or something, but
I hope so. Yeah. And
we'll
thank
help
you
Yeah,
for bringing it up for everybody. Yes, I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. So everyone be aware on, it seemed to only happen on the Telegram. I don't think it happened in Zoom, and I thought Telegram was much more secure. But again, there's many different routes, I guess, that you can go and get into these. Okay, let's see what's happening. Alex, are you possibly there on one of your other systems? I think you had 3 systems connected, and probably the one that he wants to use is the one that's giving him trouble. The other 2 are still connected. Alex? Okay, what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to pause the recording. It should say recording in progress.
Okay, my system is showing that you've never stopped the recording. So, but anyway, so let's just.
I think I paused the recording on my system, Alex, but I wasn't able to pause your system or any of the others that were recording.
Okay, well, that explains everything.
Okay.
Okay, so you
We're
can
back
hear
in
me?
record. Yes, please
You can
continue.
hear me, you
Sorry
can
for
see
the
this.
interruption.
No, it's fine. Everything was working so perfectly. I was absolutely amazed. And then the moment we did the screen share, and boom, it froze. So welcome everybody. This is the Keshe Foundation North America team meeting, and I'm really glad that you're all here and putting up with our technical glitches. It's a Sunday afternoon. It's a beautiful day. And the fact of the matter is that all of the members who are showing up today are what makes this meeting strong, because it transcends the North American continent. We're broadcasting right around the world, and I really appreciate all of you being here. We're talking about the teachings of Marin Teva Keshe and all the items that he's outlined in books number 1, 2, and 3. And we've begun a new program. And this program is a review series. And so this is the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute Teachings on Plasma Science. Today we will review the Intermediate Plasma Teaching Series. My name is Alexandra. I'm from Canada. It is July the 9th, 2023. And this is the Keshe Foundation North America Plasma Education Series. We are in the post-June 6, 2022 era. We're already past our first anniversary, and we now have a capability of making choices, and a lot of people are distraught because they don't have the capability of making choices. But we now understand that there are different places and different spaces, and so what we're bringing together is the science of our Earth space and the science of outer space as it comes to commingle with our inner space. And understanding that our inner space is ours, it also is part of the Earth's, and the sun, the solar system, and the universal community. And to help us understand this, we are continuing on a series that we started December 16th, 2022. And we've begun with these soul sessions. And now in July, we will have 4 sessions coming up. We call them the wellness through this work of the soul. And this is a continuation of the work that we've done to implement the security that is related to food, energy, and the internet. Because what we're able to do now is to reconnect the souls. And we were able to do this on a remote basis. And this is a breakthrough technology. And as such, we've been working with Rick Crammond. He's done 281 One Nation, One Planet, One Race public teachings in English for world peace. And the reason for that is obvious. We're trying to transcend the limitations of the cluster of warmongers. And it becomes our responsibility. The earth is our responsibility. And it's our responsibility to help each and every one of us understand the new technology. And Mr. Kesh has done his part. He's brought together book number 1, The Universal Order of Creation of Matters. Book number 2, The Structure of the Light. Book number 3, The Origin of the Universe. And so here we are. We're driving down the plasma highway, still searching for outer space. And the key to this is there is no speed limit, but it reflects the embodiment of our little piece of pie in the sky. And it's our embodiment, and it's our pie. And that's where the responsibility starts. And we don't need any intermediaries to tell us what we need to know. Because the knowledge is already being shared. We were born with that knowledge. And as such, life has a purpose. And so we started with the impetus that was generated from the Brazilian community, one of the powerful groups led by Raphael. And on October 14th of 2020, we started with the basic plasma teaching. And there were 2 reasons for that. One was to try and summarize all the thousands of hours of teaching into something that was a little bit more bite-sized, to provide a welcome mat for new knowledge seekers, and also to help mature knowledge seekers to somehow coherently introduce the subject to new knowledge seekers. We've been doing this for well over a decade. And so there are thousands of hours of teaching, and how do you convey that? So we had to stop with the classes here because we only represent a very small percentage of the world's population. And the first stage is for them to wake. And then once they wake, then it's for them to understand. And they need help, just like we needed help. And for the most of us, we helped ourselves by investing the time. And this is an important issue. And so today we're going to continue on the teaching side. We're going to discuss the intermediate plasma teaching and understand that we need more teachers. And so we're hopeful that this review will help more teachers have the kind of tools they need to help others. And it's not to say that this is, shall we say, the most relevant information. It's a tool. It's something to help people go through this, what we call plasma transition. So we started off, we had to learn about terminology. And we covered magnetical and gravitational force fields, natural plasma, nanostate, GaN state, and of course, order of magnitude. And this was important because we ran into a conflict in science where we like to think in straight lines, and we find that science doesn't work that way. It works in curves. And the only way that we can get into these curves is if we think outside of the box. So getting into the nanotechnology has put us outside the conventional box. And then from there, we move on into a new situation where we understand things that we don't see and understand these forces and how these forces can come together. And the reason they come together is because there's energy in motion called PM ticks, and they follow this curved path. And it's hard to explain. But basically, there are forces of attraction that bring these PM ticks together. There's certain conditions, and when they come together, they create a force field. And so we see the X and the Y axis coming together in the form of a positive energy containment. And we can understand this because when we look at our cells, we see that our cells in our bodies have boundaries. And so there's an inside of the cell and there's an outside of the cell. And so we understand that the inside is gravitational and the outside is magnetical. But the cells aren't a two-dimensional flat picture. They are three-dimensional. And so they have an X, Y, and a Z axis. And they have these fields that go around. And so these fields that go around are what we call transmission fields. And this is very important to understand because when you look at your cell, there's no door. Somehow the food has to come in and the waste has to go out. Somehow the energy has to go in. And somehow there has to be something as a result of that to allow the cell to grow, to multiply, and to repair itself. And let's not forget the most important thing, to function properly. And so it's a good thing that all the parts of the cell boundary communicate with each other through this transmission process. But today we're going to discuss transition because that involves polarity along the y-axis. And as you can see, there's more terminology that we need to become familiar with. And going back to our cell, then the answer, how does the energy inside communicate with the energy outside? And where exactly is that door? And so if we're looking for a physical door, we can imagine one, but there's no accounting for choosing which door because all the doors are the same. All of these doors are made with phospholipids, which are in the advanced stage of creation from the fundamental amino acids we talked about. So which door is it that opens? And if they open and close, how long do they stay open? How long do they stay closed? And which one opens? And are you aware when each one opens. And since you have over 70 trillion cells in your body, that's a lot of doors to take care of. And so do you have the energy to do that? Well, some of us have difficulty just even getting up out of bed. So it's quite a relief to know that the body is taking care of business. But the point being is that energy has to move across this boundary, and it does it through transition. And so interestingly enough, we can see in nature how this works when the sun comes up in the morning, and then it shines brightly at noon, and then it sets in the evening. And so the flowers grow above the ground. But what happens at night? There's no light at night. Does it stop growing? Well, no, we find that the roots grow at night. And that's normal because the roots are in the ground. And so they don't see the sunlight anyway. Does that mean the roots stop growing in the daytime? Does it mean that the leaves stop growing at the nighttime? And when we look at how the sun comes up, and it's in the red frequency, and at noon it's in the blue frequency, and then in the evening it's in the red frequency, and at night it's in no frequency. So what happens through all of these changes? And how is this energy transitioned from the sun to the earth and to the plants? And they seem to have this well organized. And so they respond accordingly. So we see there's a shift in the energy from morning to evening. And it's the way the sun travels through the sky, and apparently rises in the east and sets in the west. But we see this radical change in frequency. And what that signals to the plant, of course, is that in the morning, turn on the energy receptors above ground. At noon, open up totally to receive everything. And in the evening, turn off and get ready for the nighttime when there's no energy. But the thing is, this is all connected to the earth. So even though there's no sun at night, the sun is still shining on the earth. It's just on the other side. And just because you can't see it doesn't mean the sun is not shining. And this becomes a very important point. To understand that the sun is giving always, unconditionally, day and night. And so we have a system where we get to choose the type of energy that we receive. But 24 hours a day, we're receiving energy. And so that energy is coming in. And then you have to wonder, well, which door is it coming in through? Or which window? Or is energy transitioning without the need to have physical boundaries? And so this is exactly what we see. We see that this energy comes in plasmatically. And so we have to have a relationship between the ground and the sky. And so we look at the ground as being gravitational and the top of the plant as being magnetical. And since opposites attract, then what's going on in the ground? Because as far as the roots are concerned, and we know the roots are connected to the plant, so it just seems that, are the roots operating the same way? Where the roots deep in the ground are gravitational, and then they become magnetical, to connect to the gravitational base of the plant to become magnetical at the flower. Well, actually, that's not working, because the roots are growing from the center into the ground, and the plant is growing from the center into the sky. So how do we resolve this anomaly? So when we look at the planes by axis, and we say we have an x-axis, well, that's the transmission, that's the rotating field around the planet. When we look at the y-axis, that's a transition polar plane. Comes out the North Pole and into the South Pole. And so that's as far as we've gone so far. We're looking at the x and the y-axis. So we see that there's an interaction. It's a plasmatic interaction. And because we're thinking outside the box, now we have to look at the curvature of energy and its exchange, which explains the infinity loop and how all things are working in combination. And so we find that the magnetical force fields are pushing and the gravitational force fields are pulling. And the two work together in a balanced condition, which we call a Maggrav condition. And that Maggrav condition is in a balance, but it has no explanation as to why the plant grows. There's nothing that says change. It just explains how it is. So something else is going on, something that is not seen. And so when we look at these magnetical field for half of this picture and look at these as circular magnets, we see that the two magnets on the left repel each other. There's a gap. So there's some kind of force field in there that is forcing this gap. And by flipping the magnet, we overcome this force of the repulsion, and it converts to attraction. This is easy to understand. You just flip the magnet over, and at one point you've got a gap, at another point they're basically kissing each other. But the thing is that if you remove these magnets, you remove this effect. And so now what we've established is a physical characteristic of the magnetical field forces. The point being that if these magnets are now represented by force fields in a plasmatic state, and you have two force fields that are alike, they will repel each other. And then if you have two force fields that are opposite, they will attract to each other. And if you remove the reactor, the force fields will remain. So this becomes a characteristic of the plasma magnetical force fields. So in the physicality, if you remove the magnet, you remove the field. In a plasmatic reality, if you remove the reactor, the field remains. So if we want to see these fields, we have to imagine them. And we have to imagine how these energies come in and how energies go from one field to another field. And if we understand that light travels and light has a frequency, and so the red frequency is the slowest frequency, the blue frequency is the highest frequency. And so a lot of people think that light will slow down as it goes through a more dense medium. And that is false. The speed of light is constant. The density is not constant. And so what you find is that the closer you get to the core, the higher the frequency, which is why the blue is gravitational and the red is magnetical. And since these force fields are identical, they're both rotating in the same direction. And because at the point where they meet, they are converging, they get a little bit of a friction. And it's that friction that pushes them apart. And so you get this gap when you do repulsion. So that's what you see in the top view. And in the side view, you can see that they both are North Pole up. So by flipping one of the magnets, now what you've done is they're rotating in opposite directions. And so the force field at the point where they meet is in the same direction. And now the blue light has to cross over. And so does the green light, and so does the red light. And it's this crossing over which creates this attraction. And in the side view, you can see that the top poles are opposite. So they have to be a charge. And you don't know which charge it is, but let's say it's negative up. Let's say you're looking from the top down and you're looking at the negative on each magnet. And you try and push them together as close as you can, and you find that there's this force field of repulsion prevents you from doing that. So now we know that there is a field in there. And because these magnets are physically present, that field is physically present, although we can't see it. And there's a gap. And interestingly enough, we can put a fourth round magnet in the center and make sure that it's flipped over, and the position of the other three magnets won't change. But there were three force field interactions between the three magnets. And we've now condensed those three into one positive field in the center, and makes it look like a star formation. So by changing the pattern here, we have increased the positive force by threefold. And so that at the core is gravitational, and the negative magnets on the outside are magnetical. And so when we have two magnets together, or two plasma fields together of the same charge, they repel. And so now we understand that we can flip these magnets. And I hope no one got hurt while we were flipping those magnets. Before we go further, let's just review energy parceling units as it relates to water. We understand that water has a chemistry H2O, which stands for 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen. So we know that the hydrogen is magnetic and the oxygen is gravitational based on its mass. But this is in a balanced situation, and a balanced situation is a maggraph. And as such, a water droplet is round. But there's an anomaly here. The hydrogen is nowhere near as strong as the oxygen. And even two hydrogens is nowhere near as strong as an oxygen, yet they're in balance. That's an anomaly. Water is nature's solvent, and it's what creates life. And it is quite happy to give off its hydrogen. And it'll give off one hydrogen and leave a hydroxyl. And to give this hydrogen, it basically gets knocked right off. It's just like you click with your finger and knock off this hydrogen. We don't know where it goes, and the energy is always positive. And because you've now removed the positive, it means the hydroxyl itself is negative. It's no longer in balance. Well, it didn't seem to be in balance in the first place, because now you only have the one hydrogen trying to balance off the one big fat oxygen. And so this hydroxyl is now looking for a partner. And so when we look at the mass of that hydroxyl, we see the hydrogen is 1 and the oxygen is 8 times. That's a lot. And we remember the plasma rule, where the higher feeds the weaker. So the oxygen being higher is gravitational. The hydrogen being weaker is magnetical. But it's giving, the oxygen is giving the energy to the hydrogen. And yet it's in balance. It's in a mag-Grav condition. When we showed you the picture of the 3 magnets repelling each other, they had a gap. But what happens if we force that gap? And we said, you know, we're going to create an attraction here, and we're going to force it all together. So we know that if we bring 2 magnets together that are opposite, they will attract. So these top 2 magnets, one's positive, one's negative. The third magnet is either positive or negative. There is no third choice. So what happens to it? Is it positive or is it negative? Well, it kind of sits on the fence, doesn't it? And so it kind of flips perpendicular to accommodate the other 2 magnets. And so if we go back to the hydroxyl, we have to understand that somehow, some way, the oxygen can't just keep giving. It has to get energy back in order to be in a balance. But since the oxygen is giving to the hydrogen can't give back to the oxygen on the same path. So quite literally, we have to kind of flip things maybe 90 degrees so that we can accommodate the 2 of them, so that the oxygen can give and the hydrogen can give back. And so if we want to completely convert the repulsion to attraction, we have to completely flip the pole. So the 2 opposite poles attract each other. And again, I hope in the process of flipping these poles, no one got hurt. But the thing is, remember with the plant, the gravitational and the magnetical had to come together, but we know that the roots are attached to the plant. So there's something else unseen, because when we flip the poles over, the North Pole is magnetical and the South Pole is magnetical. And in the core, it's gravitational, but similar poles repel. So there's something else at the core. And so we introduce the soul. And so now this makes more sense. With the plasma soul at the center, and you have the two gravitational field forces rotating around the core, and then you have the magnetical field rotating around the outside. But then you have an interesting thing. You have all these other rotating fields, and they all seem to be rotating in different directions. So we have to figure things out here. So let's look at some plasma rules here. We say the energy states increase by at least an order of magnitude. So that's 10 times. And the higher feeds the lower. So we discussed that. But we can also change energy states. And so each energy state will manifest. But if it manifests as a higher energy, it's creation. And if it manifests as a lower energy, it's decay. If it doesn't change its state, it's catalytic or non-consuming. So to go from state to state, there has to be a transfer state. And that transfer state also has a rate of change. And it's higher in the higher plasma states. And it's higher by also many orders of magnitude. So what governs all this? It's this plasma energy exchange, this plasma transition, which is bound to the ethos of the universe. And that's what we're talking about. So the plasma rule is the higher feeds the weaker. So the gravitational is the taker and the magnetical is the giver. But if the gravitational is feeding the magnetical, then that makes the gravitational the giver. So now comes your point of view. Are you looking at it from inside the plasma field, or are you addressing that field? Because that field, in order to maintain its maggrav position, has to have a gravitational domination. Otherwise, it wouldn't exist. And in order to maintain that gravitational position, it has to take energy. In order to be in balance, it has to give energy. So the truth is that the gravitational giving gives to the magnetical, but the magnetical of that field does not give to the gravitational in that field in its totality, but it shares it. Well, who does it share it with? Well, some of it shares with the gravitational field in order to maintain its maggrav condition. Some of it shares with its environment, because wherever you are, you're somewhere. And some of it shares with another field that is similar to this field. And so there's no accounting for the giving. We haven't decided who we're going to give to. What we have to decide is that we're going to give. Because if we don't give, we can't receive. And that's the rule. So when we look at the creation of the universe and how it was created, it exists from energy. And this is discussed in the book number 1, The Universal Order of Creation of Matter. And so energy is always positive, and energy is always in motion. So energy always has a charge to identify the motion. And if you have motion, then you have to go somewhere. And so we now know that we can stay in the same energy level. We can interact with an adjoining environment. We can interact with another field. And we can do this through various energy fields and various energy states. And so we understand that we can see the moon and the planets and the sun. And we also understand that between here and there is a vacuum. And most people would say that a vacuum is empty. But if this energy can travel from here to the moon, and you see the moon, or if it can travel from here to the sun, or if it can travel from the sun to here, then the vacuum is not empty. It's full of principal matter. And this principal matter is a charge. It's energy in motion. And this is the plasma field transaction currency. Energy is a plasma fuel. And so we have been discussing the charge as energy in motion, and there's been no accounting for that. So we had to learn some more terms, and the most important one is susceptibility. And so what exactly is susceptibility? Well, when we look at these ganses in the bottle, and we see that the bottle is transparent because we can see the gans inside, but the gans is also physical because we can see that as well. But then there's a hole in the gans, and we can't see what's in there. In fact, we don't see anything in there. We see right through to the other side. So it's either something, it's a bottle, or it's a gans, or it's a hole in the gans. And what about the water? Oh, and what about the air? So what is it? What is it that you're looking at? And how come you're looking at all of these different things? And then, of course, the bottle is sitting on a table and it's somewhere. So something is always something. You can't say that nothing is something. Nothing is nothing. Something is always something. But it's something as opposed to being something else. And what determines that? Well, the susceptibility. And so we have to understand as part of our learning why something would want to be something as opposed to being something else. And it's bad enough to know about different energy states, but when we look at the daisy in its physicality, well, we have this yellow core in the center of hexagonal forms, and then we have this white ring around of white petals, and this is all in physicality. And I said, well, how can the daisy have these two different fields and still be a daisy? How is that possible? And look how well organized the center is and how well organized the petals are. I'm sure if you and I were trying to do this, we'd probably end up with a lot of orange and yellow flecks all over the white petals. It wouldn't have been such a beautiful job. Daisies seem to do that without any problem. And it's all part of their protein building. So how did they do this? So we have to understand that this is a natural process and is part of natural plasma. And it all comes from principal matter. So the convergence of this principal matter is the bringing together of the antimatter, dark matter, and the matter. And understanding that there's two matters. And also to understand that we're talking about plasma transition of energy. And this plasma energy is counter-entropic. It's like the sun. It gives, but it doesn't lose energy. And so when we look at the matter plasma, we have to understand that there's a physical state and a plasmatic state. And so there's a small m matter state, which is physical, and a capital M matter state, which is plasmatic. And in the physical, you can touch it and see it. But in the plasmatic sense, you can't touch it and see it, but you definitely can sense it. You know when it's there. Just like the hole in the gas, you know, something's going on. So when someone asks you, well, what is plasma? Tell them it's a kind of energy state. And so it could be a matter state, it could be a GAN state, it could be a plasmagen state, or it could be a radiance kind of energy state. These are all different energy states with all different field strengths. It all depends on your point of view. And so all of these together help us understand our Earth space, because what we have to find is our inner space. And it's not just our inner space. We have to understand that the Earth space has an inner space as well. And so when those things work together as a plasma, and if we understand this, then we will be successful in our search for outer space. This becomes one of the most important things in our life. In fact, it is the most important thing. And if that is not important, then nothing is important. So when we look at these different energy states and we sort them out, and we see that each one is by an order of magnitude stronger. So we go from the small m matter state to the capital M matter state to the nano state, GAN state, plasma state. But in between, there's this transfer state. And it's these transfer states that allow us to share this energy. But as we said, in the lower states, the transfer state is lower as well by orders of magnitude. So we find that heat and electricity are the lowest energy transfer states. So for those who are debating the merits of internal combustion vehicles and electric vehicles, will understand that what you're debating is on the lowest energy transfer state. And we already know that the nuclear physics is in a higher state, and the plasma physics is higher than that. And yes, we've graduated beyond that into the dynamic plasma and the interactive energy transfer states. But as we've seen by the anomaly, what happened is we've got our magnetical gravitational fields upside down. So we have to flip the poles and understand that the higher energy state is gravitational, which now puts the gravitational field at the top, this plasma state. And this plasma state and this principal matter, which travels through the vacuum, is gravitational. And as such, it's giving. And it gives to the lower energy states, it gives to the GAN state and the nano state, and the capital M state, and the small M state. And we find that the energy transfer state of heat and electricity is at the very bottom. It is the weakest state. And so when we draw energy, when we attract energy, this is important because it facilitates energy binding. Energy binding is gravitational. And for us to exist, this is important. It makes us self-serving, and that's important. But there's ways and means of drawing energy. And the way we're doing things on this planet, in the majority of cases, we're doing that at the expense of others. Understanding, of course, that these others are drawing energy from the expense of others. So it's the weakest drawing energy from the other weakest. It doesn't make any sense, because what we do with that is we stop the energy flow. So if we want to have this energy flow, we have to be self-serving and draw energy in. But we have to do this at the enhancement of others, because that makes our community stronger. And when you're part of a stronger community, that makes you stronger. So those who want to be stronger need to understand this. And so we see that one of the limits to that is the speed of light. Speed of light is constant and the speed of light is limited. And there's a relationship between the speed of light and the energy and mass. So the point being here is that there's no accounting for change in energy and a change in mass if the light is constant. Because we can play around with the equation and we can see that the speed of light equals energy divided by mass. Well, if the speed of light is constant, then the relationship between energy and mass is also constant. So why would energy increase? Or why would mass change? And so you see that the energy coming from the universe abides by the rule of the ethics and ethos of the universe, which involves morality, compassion, courage. And these are all factors that come together in the star formation we know as creation. And so we have to transcend that. And we did that, all of us, as plasma scientists, when we made the cups of life. And we found that we took physical matter and we created energy states of higher field strength, not only involved physical strength, but emotional strength as well. And so the first lesson, of course, was to learn the relationship between the atomic structure and the monatomic structure, where the monatomic structure represented the nanostate. And the way that the nanostate was changed was different from the atomic state. And as a result, it was many orders of magnitude stronger. And we used that, we created oil, and the three of them together in a cup with salt water created a magnetical field and a gravitational field. And we created several cups. And just by changing the components, we created an emotional cup and a physical cup. And together, these cups created a field, gravitational at the core and a magnetical field around, and they acted as one cup, the cups of man. So we had to introduce a new type of math, neutron math. Because we had many man-made barriers to the knowledge of Creator. So interestingly enough, light has mass. And when we look at the periodic table of elements, each element has a mass. And ironically, religions conduct mass. And this is where spirituality adds to the mass confusion of this neutron math. Because when you look at the periodic table of elements, you don't need to be a mathematics scholar to realize that if oxygen has a mass that's 16 times greater than hydrogen, and if the hydrogen mass is 1 and a bit, 16 times 1 and a bit is 16 plus a bit. So how does the mass of oxygen end up being 16 minus a bit? It doesn't add up. Someone is getting shortchanged here. And it's all right, because unless you're a nuclear scientist, it doesn't much matter. But it does matter. It's all part of matter. And matter has mass. And it's affecting our life. And it becomes an important part of life, because just not understanding the relationship between hydrogen and oxygen, which is the fundamental components of water, which is nature's solvent, which is responsible for life on this planet. And from there, we can add the carbon and nitrogen and create the amino acids, which are the building blocks of life. Did we say this was important? And then we introduced copper and zinc, and we got this GANT stuff. So where's this neutron? So inside the atom is a nucleus. And in the center of the nucleus is a gravitational plasmatic field. So this is where the neutron resides. Excuse me. So the neutron has this gravitational aspect, but it's related to its environment. In order to maintain that maggrav condition, it has to be its own maggrav. As a maggrav, it has its own self-contained gravitational field. And so we understand that a maggrav condition is a plasmatic condition that consists of matter, antimatter, and dark matter. And the combination of those three creates this gravitational magnetical energy level balance, which we call a maggrav. And so what is the role of neutrons in a plasma state? Well, let's pick nanostate. So we say, okay, well, that's a kind of energy state, and it's a higher energy levels by at least an order of magnitude from the physical state, right? So therefore, the neutron itself, which exists in the physical state, in order for it to exist in the plasma state, has to enter this higher energy state. And even though it goes into this higher energy state, it has to maintain its gravitational state. So the gravitational state is now higher. It's a higher energy state. And as we've said, the higher energy state feeds the lower energy state. Okay, well, higher than nanostate is the GAN state. So what is the neutron's role in the GAN state? Well, again, GAN state is a kind of energy state, and it's a higher energy state by an order of magnitude. Well, the neutron has to maintain its state, and it has to also enter a higher energy state. And that state has to be a gravitational energy state. And being a gravitational state, it's of a higher energy state. And so now it gets to feed the lower energy states. Are you seeing the pattern here? So we see the difference between the magnets and the dynamic plasma reactors. So if we look at the neutron in its gravitational state as being at the core of the round magnet, and it has this magnetic field around it, which either repels or attracts. The key point was that in a magnetic situation, if we remove the magnetic field disappears. But in a dynamic plasma reactor, which has a magnetical field that emits and absorbs, if we remove the reactor, the magnetical field remains. This is the difference between the physical reality and the plasma reality. So we know that the neutron is a dynamic plasma reactor, but it can divide into a proton and electron. But the proton and electron remain in combination. Well, where's the residual neutron magnetical field? That created the neutron and the electron combination, and we say, well, wait a second, that's hydrogen. And so the neutron is absent in hydrogen. And hydrogen is the only element in the periodic table of elements that doesn't have a neutron. So we find that the nature of the hydrogen and the nature of the proton-electron combination and the nature of PM ticks, which are principal matter, are basically all the same. They're a combination of different energy levels: matter energy, dark matter energy, and antimatter energy. And so this is the relationship of PM ticks and energy in respect to their matters. So now when we look at the principal matter, we see that as a parceling unit. And there's a force field interaction of the antimatter, dark matter, and matter, which creates this mag-grav condition. So let's review the structure. The neutron, it consists of matter plus antimatter plus dark matter, and it is a self-contained mag-grav. Okay, so that's the neutron taken care of. What about the electron? Well, it consists of matter plus antimatter plus dark matter, and is a self-contained mag-grav. Is there an echo? What about the proton? Well, it consists of matter plus antimatter plus dark matter, and is a self-contained mag-grav. Are you seeing the pattern here? There's a structure within a structure. So somehow we're doing a mass conversion. So there has to be a plasma conversion of energy into mass. So we all understand the sun and the solar field forces. We obviously understand the earth and the earth field forces. Those of you who are sitting in a chair, that chair should be on the ground. Those of you who don't understand this would be sitting on a chair on the ceiling. And the neutrons themselves are obviously additive, because we can move from state to state. So based on the plasmatic interaction of these magnetical field forces, and understand that this has to take into account the environment. So when we look at the small m matter conversion, we find that there's a physical conversion of energy into matter state. And because the higher strength feeds the lower strength, in this process, neutrons decay. And it's the same thing. There's a plasmatic interaction of the gravitational magnetic field forces with respect to its environment. So that means that this conversion is conditional. It's an environmental conversion of energy into every other condition. So we can create elements, we can create molecules from the elements, and the neutrons may be additive or decayed. And this is all based on the respect to the environment. So now we have another pattern, which leads us to the new atomic mass. Because in order to balance the equation, we have to redo the equation and see that the mass of the neutron equals. So we know it includes the proton mass and the electron mass. And we know that it comes together from the mass of the matter, antimatter, and dark matter. But it also includes the mass of the PM ticks. And so now we have a balanced energy level. And the totality is achieved through the energy level balance and position. And that's the new atomic mass. And so now we understand from there why the sun has a catalytic stability. And from that, we can grow things which we call natural creation, or we can create physicality, which we call natural decay. And because of this plasma feeding rule and how it works out, energy has to go both ways. There has to be a give and a take. And so we introduce the soul rules. Because they have to balance things out. So we have to start looking beyond that little tiny red dot, which we call Earth space. It's part of our man's universe. And it's only a small component. And you see how vast the rest of the universe is, but that's not the rest of the universe. That's just rest of part of the universe. The real rest of the universe is even beyond that. So we really have to lift our horizons. And we're only at the transition state, which allows us to exchange energy from a lower state to a higher state, or from a higher state to a lower state. And we know that we can transmit energy from here to there, and there's a connection in between. But whichever energy state we're talking about, we are only a part, and we are within that state. There's no accounting for the creation of that state. We're just looking at that hydrogen component, which we now know is electron-proton marriage. And we know there's this interaction point in between. And there's this relationship where the higher field state is the gravitational and the smaller field is the magnetical. And there's a relationship between the two. So what's going on in our brain? Because we have a left side and a right side. It's a little bit different from the way the Earth is created, but it's supposed to be balanced, isn't it? And in order to be balanced, there has to be something gravitational in the core. And we find that that's our soul. So in the core of the atom, we see the neutron. So in the core of our brain, we see the soul. And being gravitational is very strong. And it's not confined by the physicality of the limitations of the physicality of the skull, if you will. And this is why there's no poker playing in outer space, you see, because poker involves lying, cheating, bluffing, and deceit. And these are all possible on Earth in its physicality. But there are other players in outer space. And the problem for us is that the emission and absorption spectrum, these spectra are your domain. And as such, this domain is your sun source. And like the sun, and everyone can see the sun when it comes up, this domain is your sun source for all to see. So you can't lie, cheat, bluff, or deceive in outer space because everyone can see the truth. And so when we talk about give and take, we see the difference. When we talk about money, before we can give it, we have to receive it. But when you're talking about energy, in order to maintain your mag-grav condition, you have to give, then you receive. And this is why we had problems with the commandments, because of the limitation of the speed of light. So when we find that the energy exceeds the speed of light as we know it, it involves the ethos of the universe, which involves morality, compassion, and courage. Then we see the conflict that's between the laws of man and the laws of nature. And there's the only reason there's a conflict is because of the knowledge. There is no conflict between the laws of nature and the laws of man. We just made it that way. It's artificial. But when we look at our soul positioning, we see that, you know, as we were born, we see the relationship between the womb, our mother, and the Mother Earth. And then we look at our physicality, the relationship between our brain, our body, and our position on Mother Earth. And so we see the earthbound strength and how we relate to it. We see the physical soul of the man and the physical soul of the body. And we say, well, the physicality is stronger. So we're looking at it from the earthbound point of view, aren't we? We need to look at it from the universal point of view. The universal soul of man is stronger than the universal soul of the body. And we have to understand that this is a plasma field reference, where the stronger field feeds the weaker field. So how does energy transit? So we understand that we can transit electricity on telephone poles. We hook up a wire, and so we have these poles that litter the land, and these wires that are hanging from these poles. So we transit energy from the power station to our homes. And so now we understand why we continually get reinforced with this double crossing, because this is how we rob energy at the expense of others. It's all part of the energy binding, but remember, we're taking from the weakest. And so we concentrate on having to deviously steal this energy through fear and greed. And then we rob our own energy through ego validation or just plain leaking. All of this is bush harvesting, the physical feeding system, by lying and cheating and stealing from others. And when we say others, that includes ourselves. So we have to learn the law of detachment, to be detached and at ease, so that we can soar past the ego and be free. Past the limitations, the imposed limitations. And so we see that the soul is at the core, and as the core, that becomes the gravitational core component. And when we compare that to the others, we see that this core component has a field strength that comes not only from the energy at the core, but the combination of the antimatter, dark matter, and matter state. And it creates 3 dimensions. You have a base that's gravitational, and then you have a connecting point that's magnetic. And we can change to go from a 3-star base to a 4-star base, pyramid shape. We increase the field strength. So obviously we've changed the dynamic plasma. This has to interact with another plasma. And so we find that interaction point is the crossover point between the magnetical and gravitational force fields. And there's a connection there. So this is how we can see that energy is coming and energy is leaving. And then there's a connection. So interestingly enough, when we look at our planet, physically, it rotates in one direction. But plasmatically, the northern hemisphere rotates in one direction and the southern hemisphere rotates in another direction. And if you're standing on the northern hemisphere, your feet are on the ground. And if you're standing in the southern hemisphere, well, your feet are still on the ground. So this is the difference between the physical reality and the plasmatic reality. And so if we didn't have this gravitational stability in the center, this would not be possible. So what does that mean? That means that the core is the gravitational force field, and around the outside is the magnetic force field. So our existence and our physicality is within this plasmatic force field. And on top of that, we have our own force field. So the existence of our force field is dependent on the force field of the Earth, which in fact is our environment. And even though we stay in this physical position on Earth, we are able to transition different ranges. We can go over mountains, or we can go under the water or under the ground, and we can change our position within the environment. How do we do that? And then we can play music. And we know that the low notes have a low frequency and the high notes have a high frequency. And we found that the higher frequency is more gravitational. And so when we climb the stairway to heaven, we have to decide, are we going up or down? Well, that's determined by our susceptibility. Well, what affects your susceptibility? Well, there are 2 factors. There's a rate of change from stable to unstable and from complex to simple. So the more simple and more unstable something is, the more susceptible it is to being magnetical. And the more complex something is, the more stable it is. And then it becomes susceptible to being more gravitational. How much magnetical can it be? How much gravitational can it be? What does it take to create a magnetical gravitational balance known as a maggrav? And what does it take to have a magnetical emission as opposed to a gravitational absorption? And what does it mean, absorption? So let's look at that. So we remember that hydroxyl that we sheared off that hydrogen? Well, where's it going? Who knows? What's the susceptibility? And what about the hydroxyl? Well, we haven't specified the environment, have we? So if the hydroxyl is going to link up with something, the hydrogen is also going to have to link up with something. Because this energy is always in motion, we can't stop it until it gets into a maggrav condition. So now we understand the relationships. So you look at the singularities, the hydrogen, the PM tick, or the duality, the hydroxyl, oxygen, hydrogen combination, or the trinity, the balance, the maggrav condition. These are all dimensions. So to understand these relationships, we have to identify a field reference, a context. At that point, we can establish a relationship. Which means that when we look at these initial fundamental particles, which we call PM ticks, we understand that there are PM ticks from antimatter, dark matter, and from matter state. So each of these PM ticks has a different field strength based on the origin of the force field. If we look at the periodic table of elements and we see that the different elements in their physicality have different mass, that in order to maintain that mass, they have to have a different force field. But they're in the same energy state, the physical energy state. So if we were to say pack A has a energy state of antimatter, not all the PM ticks within that antimatter would have the same field strength. If we look at pack B being the dark matter, not all the PM ticks would have the same field strength. And if we look at pack C, all the PM ticks coming out of pack C, the matter, wouldn't necessarily have the same field strength. So you have a variable field strength coming out of each pack, and you have a variable field strength coming from the combination of the packs. And the only thing that determines the field strength is the susceptibility. Because in the process of determining the susceptibility, you determine the nature of the maggrav condition. But the MAGRAV condition has come from this force field of the combination of the antimatter, dark matter, and matter state. But the PM ticks don't have that MAGRAV condition in its environment. We don't know where this environment is. So when we look at a plasma and we say it's positive, has a gravitational core, has a magnetical field around it, and has different force fields going around that, we don't know where we are. We could be anywhere. There's no counting for that. And so when we look at the Earth, we see there's a northern hemisphere and a southern hemisphere. But the Earth is very complex, which means it's very stable. And so we see that there are a lot of fields happening in between. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take a little focal point here. We're just going to examine inside this box what's going on here. So here we are with a magnification of what's inside the box, and we see that the gravitational field at the bottom is in the core and the magnetical field around the outside. But then we have all these rotating fields in between. And some are going in the same direction as the neighbor, and some are going in the opposite direction. So if opposites attract, then some would be gravitational or magnetical. But if like repel, then how do you have two fields running in parallel? So, and then if you have a field going in a particular direction where the higher strength feeds the weaker strength, then you have a gravitational going towards magnetical. But then the gravitational is running in the opposite direction of the other field, which is gravitational. So we have all these anomalies. So we just can't put this all together. This becomes like a bowl of spaghetti. It doesn't really make any sense. And the reason for it is because we have not considered the gaps. Remember the nano gaps? So there are other field forces here which we're not taking into account. What we're seeing is the net result. And the net result is we're seeing fields traveling in pairs. And when two fields travel together in one direction, they create a magnetical force field. And when two fields travel in another direction, they create a magnetical force field. But there's friction in between, isn't there? So how do we determine this? Let's go back to the magnets. And let's understand that we take these three magnets, which we said are negative, and they have this gap in between, which we now know is a repulsion field. The thing is, we only have to flip one of the magnets in order to get these three fields to come together. So we take the bottom magnet and flip it over. Then you see that we can create an attraction field. And when you look at this formation, it's very similar to the way water is structured with the gravitational oxygen and the two hydrogens on the outside. And so this accounts for a balance. Since the balance is obviously working, where you have a gravitational in the core, and the magnetical field on the outside. So if you look at a graphic of this combination, and we say, okay, well, the green circle would be the oxygen is rotating in one direction, and the other two are hydrogen, they'd be rotating in the opposite direction because they're the same. And so where the oxygen meets, say, the hydrogen on the left, the fields are flowing in the same direction. Okay, that makes sense. When you take the one with the circle on the right, and where they meet, they're flowing in the same direction. Oh, well, okay, that's good. That's working. And so we know when we put the three together that we created this magnetical field around. Okay, so that's working. But what happens when the two hydrogens are coming together? The rotation is conflicting. It's grinding. It's the same thing when you sharpen a knife on a grinding wheel. You see the sparks flying. There's friction. In the plasmatic condition, the friction comes from two fields of the same poles rubbing together. And so some of that comes around and stays within the field, and the rest of it diverges and creates a vacuum condition. And we could relate this to the physical friction, the same way we do with the sharpening a knife on a grinding wheel. But the thing about the plasma friction is it's converging and going somewhere, because all of these PM ticks are created from a matter state, and they're looking for a common denominator. And so they will go there, and they will do that at light speed. So one of the ways we have emission is from this friction. And another way we have this emission is from this plasma transition from the y-axis coming out of the pole. And then we have another emission that comes from rotation of the individual fields, because the energy is everywhere. And this is all done at light speed. So when we have emission, we have to have absorption. So when we take these PM ticks that are created from the friction, they go somewhere, and wherever they go, they are absorbed. When we emit from the emission pole, we can have the field force come back into the southern pole and get absorbed again. Helps us maintain our maggrav condition. And then through the rotation of the field, we can have this emission. And so it comes in contact with an environment, which is also emitting back to us. And so we can absorb it that way as well. So whichever way we do emission, which we say is creation, we can do absorption. The balance of creation is the balance of emission and absorption. And it's all done at light speed. So when we talk about attraction, there has to be a common denominator. And so if you have two things that are common, they're obviously of a similar pole. So what has to happen? There has to be an adaptation. So that when these two come together, they get blended together. And then the energy is absorbed and they act as one. So it's no longer two poles. It's one. But it has a higher field strength. So there was a neutron in one, there was a neutron in the other, and now we have a neutron of a higher field strength within a magnetical field of a higher field strength. And so this is how we can operate on the Earth. We can go from one range to another range and just transmit ourselves between these ranges, or we can go up and down and transition ourselves and stay within the range, stay within the physicality. But when we created the cups of life, we created the cup of soul, the cup of emotion, the cup of physicality, the cup of inertia, and the cup of the earth. And then we put them together as a stacker unit, and then we can see the relationship of the gravitational and magnetic force fields of transition and how we operate in that, and we can change our position. So we see that the gift of life is the ability to give and take energy. We can do creation, co-creation, procreation. This is the progression of creation. We call it growth. And as such, what we emit is what we absorb. And we do this at light speed. But we have many different neutron levels, you see. Because in order for us to maintain a maggrav condition, which is the balance, it's a relationship between the magnetic and gravitational force fields. Now, when you have this balance, two things happen. One, it's not visible, it's invisible. And two, nothing happens. And we know nothing is nothing. So when we look at the Kesh model of the nuclear decay of the neutron, and we see the neutron, how it breaks down into a fundamental decay process into an atom, which is a proton-electron marriage, this is where we release these PM ticks. This is part of the decay process. But that's just one side. That's the emission. So these PM ticks then absorb. So when we look at these PM ticks and we see, well, wait a second, they're like the electrons, they're magnetical. And they have a matter state, dark matter state, and antimatter state. And they are now at the core component. So when we look in detail in this atomic structure, and we look at the electron-proton marriage, we see that both the electron and the proton have a matter state, antimatter state, and dark matter state. So clearly, they're not the same field strength. And so the PM ticks that are derived from that are not going to be at the same field strength either. Let me rephrase this. The PM ticks derived from the antimatter state of the proton are not the same as the PM ticks derived from the dark matter state of the proton. They're not the same as the PM ticks derived from the antimatter state of the electron. And they're not the same as the PM ticks derived from the dark matter state of the electron. They're not the same. Yet we call them PM ticks, electrons and protons, antimatter, dark matter, and matter. There's no accounting for the difference. And we call them an atom. And so it's true that a hydrogen atom and an oxygen atom are not the same. So if we look at the core component of the neutron, although it's gravitational, then we have to say that it is not the same. So would we be correct in saying hydrogen is 1 and oxygen is 8? So is oxygen actually hydrogen 8, where you have the number is determined by the number of protons? So oxygen would have 8 protons, hydrogen would have 1 proton. And the electron proton are a combination. So there will be 1 electron in the hydrogen and 8 electrons in the oxygen. But the mass of the oxygen is 16. And so I was taught, and this was incorrect, that there would be 16 electrons. And the only reason I'm mentioning this is because in order to have an electron, which is magnetical, there has to be some kind of gravitational corresponding field force to maintain that maggrav condition. And we know that because when we look at the GANS is like a popcorn. It's puffed out. And it has all of these negative charges all over the place, and it has this core, which is gravitational. But we can create a GANS out of all of the elements of the periodic table of elements. So we can also say that the GANS is not the same. It's just like saying car. You don't know what color it is. You don't know what brand it is. You don't even know how many wheels it has. And you don't even know if it has a motor. But when you look at this, now you're looking at a dandelion. And you say, well, here's the seed formation from a dandelion. And it looks just like GANS in physical state. But you know what? The dandelion used to be yellow, and there's no yellow here. It's all white. So nature knows something. So we just assume that there's 8 neutrons in the core. Is it 8 neutrons? We know there's 8 protons because each proton has an electron. But if the mass of the neutron is 8 more, then where are these electrons? Since the neutron can decay into an electron-proton combination, these electrons must be inside the neutron. They must be embodied within the neutron. And if the electron is embodied within the neutron, so must be the proton. And if the force field of the electron is different from the force field of the proton, then the force field of the matter in the electron is different from the force field of matter within the proton. So when you say neutron, what are you talking about? We have arbitrarily said that the neutron has a certain mass. And then we said, let's divide the mass of the element by the number of neutrons to figure out how many neutrons are in there. And then from there, we can figure out how many protons and how many electrons. Well, that's great. That just takes care of the schematic of the physicality, but it doesn't account for the energy, because when you look at the star formation of these rotating motors, and inside each of these, there's a embodiment of GANs. These are all mechanical rotating balls with GANs inside, and as they rotate, they create this plasma field, and each one has this, and you know this plasma field is magnetical, and the combination of these all come together, we create this dynamic plasma state in the center. There's no rotating ball, there's no motor, there's no GANs. So what we have is a small m matter state, which is physical. That includes the motor and the balls. We have a GAN state, which is physical. It's inside the rotating balls. And then each of these balls has a plasma state, which is not physical. And the combination of all of these together is a dynamic plasma state, which is not physical. And then you create this state in the center at the gravitational core. So the three balls on the bottom are a gravitational relationship with the one ball at the top, which is magnetical. The dynamic plasma state in the core is gravitational, and the combination of the force field around is magnetical. The gravitational feeds the magnetical. Which gravitation are you talking about? Which magnetical are you talking about? Or are we looking at the totality of the whole thing, and we see it as a combination in action? And we see that we have different flavors, different energy fields within the plasma field. So here is a artificial picture of a plasma scan, and you can see it's well organized. And it has different colors representing different field forces. And then we had Tesla 129, where we created a magnetical field instantaneously, which changed the neutron level because we changed the force field. And there was no explosion, there was no tsunami, and no one got hurt in the process. And so we had a universal body enhancement unit, which we used to enhance the physicality of the body. And then we created a material enhancement unit to enhance the production of elements. And we find that these units can actually fly. And then when we measured the mass of the material enhancement unit, we found that it changed. It got heavier, a lot heavier. So when we look at our main center exhibition, and we see the material enhancement unit and the equipment that we use to bring that in, couldn't lift the unit to take it out. We had to get heavier equipment. There's no mass confusion. The neutron level changed. And so this is the point. You, as your soul, when you're doing the meditation, in order to enhance your strength, open up to the energy of the universe, allow it to come in and yield to its forces. That way you can receive. You provide the pattern, you get the energy. You get to choose. You get to choose the picture. So not only do we look at, say, physical flying saucers that can navigate all over the place, but we have these cylindrical saucers and these spherical saucers, and that really funny one that has arms and legs we call man. And all of these work within the environment known as Earth. But that's an arbitrary choice. That was our choice. And so we've been teaching this for over a decade. 493 Novice Seekers workshops in a row, hosted by Rick Kramen, transcending the limitations of nuclear science. And we keep going. This is the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute, teachings on plasma science, calling all knowledge seekers. Life's learning lessons transmute your soul growth. Use the World Peace Treaty to enhance that. So sign it. Sign it with a pen. Sign it with your soul. Sign it with your heart and mean it. So it's the dilution of the emotions that's coming through the universe, which allows the fields of life choices. And these are free from the boundaries or abuse. The ethos maps your position, and the universal community is your travel guide. And they will welcome you because the speed of love manifests and determines your inner space emotional constructs. There's an earthbound soul family, and it needs to go through this gravitational transformation, the different neutron levels, which we call represented by the physical and emotional vitality. And so this all comes from the plasma dilution through the emotion of knowledge, which is embodied in the transmutation connection, which connects equally to the universal cosmic rays. Freedom broadcast. It's a freedom broadcast of inner space. Choosing energy transit through the proper plasma resonance. Plasma science needs to continue to be delivered in exchange for peace on Earth. So welcome to the new outer space age. I hope you enjoyed the lesson. Thank you very much for allowing me to present.
And thank you, Alex, for presenting. There was quite a lot there, as usual, for us to consider and contemplate and work with and unravel. So slowly, we learn more. You know, that beautiful video you voiced over, do you have the link to that? I was thinking we do have a very large dental school in Connecticut, in Farmington, I believe. And somehow I'd like to get that video. I know I have it, but I haven't been able to find it and put it in the chat or in the Telegram.
I'll send it to you in the Telegram.
Okay, I appreciate that. Would anyone like to raise a question, make a comment, object to something that was said, confirm something? Or any of the above? Yeah, I was thinking of, I took a picture of a tomato plant, and I know you were talking about roots and everything. Let me just share the screen for a moment if I could, and then take it back after this. I'm sure you can hear me, yes?
Yeah, I'm trying to stop the share.
Okay, I got it. Okay, you were saying the roots grow at night and probably the leaves, I guess, grow in the day. This is just
Yes,
a
sir.
little tomato plant that we started. But the similarity I was seeing was these little hairs that come off the side of it. And obviously that's another, not so obvious, I've never understood it. But as Mr. Kesh said, these little, the skin that we have and the little hairs or the seed that's in there is attracting energy. So when the plant is smaller, I think it has a lot more, there must be thousands of these hairs going up. And that must be another way for them to absorb energy, whether they're at rest, it's at night, or during the day. I know Mr. Kesh said we're doing this constantly. This is where we get 80% of the energy. So I just noticed a similarity. I always had wondered about these hairs until Mr. Kesh went into this vortex, which he said he would teach more. But if we were able to see a picture, this plant is probably pulling in very small fields, but continuous fields coming in. And I just thought I'd share that as another interesting observation, I would say. And as he said, with our bodies, there's not one hair that's there by accident. They all have a function. And even if you don't have a hair, that point or that crosshatch is still absorbing energy. So wouldn't you say that this is part of its energy absorption protocol?
Based on what we know, I would say yes. Based on our ignorance, we would just call that fluff.
Yeah, fuzz.
Yeah,
It never, I always was wondering, because we did grow a number of tomatoes, not a lot, just a backyard garden, but I would always notice this on there. And then I just raised a couple of these plants in the last few weeks, a little late in the season, but I noticed these hairs, and then I correlated it to what Mr. Kesh was saying about the small vortexes in our skin continuously all over our body. So this plant probably day and night is pulling in energies this way as well, plus the roots, plus creating some sort of dome around it to take in energies. And of course, the plants have figured out a lot more than we have as far as reducing the killing. But I just thought I'd show that. Very similar to our own hair. And that's probably, I know he said our hair was nanomaterials. So this may be a type of nanomaterial as well. Almost like an antenna.
Yeah, so the scientific term for this is side chain.
I knew that. No, just kidding. I haven't heard that term before. What did you call it? Side chain?
Side, S-I-D-E,
oh,
side chain.
chain. Okay. I see the side, but I don't see the chain. Maybe they're all linked together in a way. Definitely antennas, though.
Well, just a moment. So, you understand the chain connection from atoms. Like if you look at a copper wire, and I know you're a strong fellow, but I don't think you can pull a copper wire apart.
No, not this cycle.
Okay, so that's a pretty strong chain. But you do the nano coating, and you find that strong link has been replaced, and it's been replaced with gaps. So you can damage that, right? You can damage the nano coating.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. Well, you can damage these side chains as well. Right. If you take your fingers and you pinch this plant, let's say you want to move this plant from one place to another, because you have this beautiful picture, and I'm guilty as everybody else, I would grab the plant by the stem,
yep,
and move it. but in the process of
I see
pinching
where
it,
you're going with this.
I would damage that.
So rather than pull it up, in a way, dig it up.
Yeah, yeah, it would be better. You can imagine the trauma the plant goes through when you move it, you know, and if you ever worked in a greenhouse and you see how they handle the plants and everything, and I could just imagine the stress that they go, you know. Yeah, I think of that emoji with the happy face crying, you know,
Yeah, and we
tears
never,
coming out of the plants.
yeah, we don't think of this at all. I don't think 1 out of 500 people would understand that this is an energy absorb. I'm not positive it is, but it certainly looks very similar to the hairs.
Hold it.
Way. Yeah.
No, I don't accept that. I don't accept that. Okay, I thought we were done with that. You say you're not positive. I mean, like you spend hours listening to these lessons, and not just mine, but you know, you're probably one of the most dedicated knowledge seekers, and you're telling me that you're not positive. You know,
Right. Oh, there's a
well,
lot I'm unsure of.
well, you see the hair,
I
okay?
do.
So
Maybe
you
this
know
is
that.
a type of pest repellent or something.
Well, yeah, but you see that the hair is thicker
Yeah.
at the base,
Yeah.
and then it's thinner at the
Oh, yeah.
outside, right?
Definitely.
Oh,
Yeah. Well, they're
okay,
different
so we know which
lengths.
side is gravitational.
Yeah.
Oh, and different lengths too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
May I make a comment?
So you know, higher. Go ahead.
Yeah, you can pinch off the top of that plant and those little hairs grow into roots and you can have another plant. I did that last year. In the fall, I clipped off the tops of the tomato plants just before frost and put these things in water and all those hairs grew into roots, just as a aside.
Wow.
And then I started another plant. You can actually start an infinite number of plants just from the tops.
This could create an infinite number if you
Right.
were so careful with it. So you see, Alex, you're not accepting my unsurety, but maybe they're a type of root in a way.
Oh no.
Or-
Erm is reaffirming her surety.
Okay.
Okay, because now we understand the relationship of the magnetical gravitational forces there. So something is something as opposed to something else. So the plant has an ability to adapt. It does it differently from the way we do it, but it needs roots, it needs leaves, and how does it decide? So if you look at the base of the stem, you see that it's thicker than it is at the top. So the base is gravitational, the top is magnetical. If you look at those hairs, the hairs coming out of the stem are thicker, that's gravitational, and the tip of the hairs is magnetical. Okay, so when you look at the bottom leaf, it has a distance from the root. And it's not a hair, as Erm says, right? It becomes something else.
Yeah.
And at a point below the ground, it's not a leaf, it's a root. So you're looking at a gradient charge. You're looking at a something causing a manifestation that is different. But it's all part of the same plant and it's well organized. So this magnetical gravitational relationship is very, very important. You know, you heard about the depressed atom, eh?
The depressed who?
The depressed atom.
No.
Oh yeah, I was very depressed. He had a feeling that he was gonna lose his electron. And I asked him if he was sure, and he says, yeah, he was positive.
There's a couple subtleties hidden in there.
the hair is against other insects. There's some liquid in it against other insects.
Okay, I just took it as
Yeah, sure, maybe too.
it could have multifunction, yes?
Yeah, multifunctional, right?
We know the roots can grow from it. I'm
Yeah.
assuming it is absorbing energy, and it can also be some sort of defense mechanism for the plant itself. And smaller ones, I think, smaller insects.
Yeah, and there is a liquid in this hair against
Something that,
poison or something.
yeah, a little repulsive then. So this is its own natural, perhaps defense in a way,
Yeah.
or shielding, as Alex was mentioning. And in the future, I think it would be so, Mr. Kesh said, we'll have videos of these energies, 80% of our energies coming in through our skin, let's say, or the majority of it, the lungs, the eyes, and a few other things. But it would be great for children and adults to see a human and a plant basically doing the same sort of work, a different way. But in the future, we're going to have these videos to share. And I think this will make the understanding of the plasma absorption really a solid, where we could see it on maybe not the Kirlian photography, maybe so, but probably more detailed than that.
Oh, I'm really glad you brought that up.
Okay.
I just want to just deviate slightly about this Kirlian photography.
Okay, that's great. That's going to be a tool in the future for sure.
Well, there was a YouTube video that I seen where someone was doing Kirlian photography, and they were using it to disprove the aura of the plant.
Okay.
And they said that you understand that if you were to take a leaf and cut that part of the leaf, the Kirlian photography would still show the soul of the plant emitting a force field representing the design of the leaf, right? You agree with that?
That you cut off.
Yes.
Yeah, as Mr. Kesh said, when you have a kidney removed, the field of the kidney is still there, even though the physical kidney is not.
Right. So this YouTuber was making the claim that this was false because he designed Kirlian photography. He recreated it in his own home, and he was able to demonstrate how that force field was actually altered by the cutting of the leaf. But what he actually proved was that he didn't have Kirlian photography. So why was he able to show a, shall we say, a pattern that reflected the energy, but reflected the energy of the cut part of the leaf? So that's my question to you. I'm putting you on the spot, sort of, but I think you're up for it. Why do you think that is?
Shall I guess? I'm not sure. You said he didn't have that sort of camera.
Well, he claimed that he did.
Okay.
Because he's seen a glow, an energy glow around the plant. Then after he cut the leaf, that energy flow contracted to the new position that reflected the cut. So what could you conclude with that picture?
Well, maybe it made a nano coating on the cutting. Perhaps.
Yeah. Well, it probably did because the plant wants to heal itself, right?
To grow the leaf back, starting with a nano layer.
Okay, so that's fine, but we have an opposition to an understanding of the Kirlian photography because it conflicts with even what I taught at one of the private classes and what you just mentioned, what Mr. Kesh is mentioning. So, you know, if someone has a, let's say, a salamander, you know, has his foot cut off, the salamander has the capability of growing that foot back. So the essence that allows that foot to grow back would be the plasmatic aura, so that the foot can grow back into that. Right? Makes sense?
Oh, yeah, and we have the capability as well. It's just we haven't used it in a long time.
No, I understand that, but I'm
Okay.
just going back to this Carillion photography. He didn't see that. In other words, if he were to take a picture of the salamander, he would not see that aura in his emission spectrum. So, but he's claiming it's Carillion photography. So now I want you to derive a conclusion. How do you resolve this anomaly between what this YouTuber did and what Mr. Kesh is saying? How would you resolve that anomaly?
I don't see the anomaly. He didn't have the actual correct photography. So how
There you
could
go.
he see it?
Okay, but he's seen an emission spectrum. So what is the difference between what he's seen and what is genuine Carillion emission?
Not sure.
That's an honest answer.
Yeah.
So very basic. This is the key difference between understanding the physical physics versus the plasma physics.
You mean like when you grow the finger or the toe with a reactor, where layer by layer it gets built up?
But it'll grow into the plasma field. Let's go back to this.
There are many anomalies, no question.
Okay, but this is an important point, because to this day, many knowledge seekers still don't get it. We have a clear difference between the physical science and the plasma science, and we have trouble identifying. And so if we look at the characteristic of the plasma, are you still able to hear me, by the way?
Oh, clearly, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm trying to get the picture up, but I can't right now. So what I'm going to say is that remember the picture where I had the magnets and then I had the fields of the magnets, and I said, well, you know, when you remove the magnets, you remove the field.
Okay. I know you had a number of pictures of magnets, yes.
Yeah, but in physics.
Now we're not hearing you.
When you remove the magnet, you remove the field.
All right, we missed the sentence, Alex. When you remove the magnet.
In a plasma reality, when you move the reactor, field
it's breaking up.
When you remove the, okay, I know why it's breaking up. Okay.
I did hear you said when you remove the magnet, you remove the field.
In physicality.
In physicality, okay.
So when he cut off that leaf and when he saw the emission spectrum, he saw what he thought was plasma energy, or he saw what he thought was a Carillion representation. And it might have been, but it was in the physical state. The true Carillion photography was able to see the energy in a plasmatic state. So in a plasmatic state, when you remove the reactor, the field remains. Are you with me?
Yeah. Even though that's almost counterintuitive, but once you introduce that field, you're saying it stays in that area, that position?
The plasmatic field stays, yes.
Mhm.
There's a plasmatic
Residual, okay.
residual, yeah.
Yep, yep.
You know, what I'd like you to do here is
You can take the screen back, Alex.
would you stop sharing first,
Okay.
please?
Although there is one other point I wanted to bring up, but let's go back
Okay.
to your sharing. No, go ahead.
Okay,
Okay,
we're
I
gonna
stopped
try
the
it.
share.
I'm gonna try it now.
We're seeing it says Alex has started screen sharing. There it is. Okay, it's come up.
So when you look at the fields of attraction and repulsion from the magnets, you know that there's a field there because you can feel it, right? But if you take those magnets away, you won't feel those fields anymore. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, in a plasmatic state, if you have this plasmatic field and it was created by a plasma reactor, you can remove the reactor, the field will remain. Okay, let's go back to the salamander. We cut the foot off. The aura of the foot remained. And the salamander has the skill to regrow that foot. But he has to have that plasmatic field to grow into, because that plasmatic field is of a higher energy state and it will feed to the lower energy state, which is physical. You okay with that?
Sounds good.
This is so fundamental to understanding the plasma science. And every time that we run into a, shall we say, an objection, it's because of the failure to understand this key point. You have an aura that's around your body. Your physical body as a baby grew. Your aura had to grow first. You grew into your aura. When your aura increased in size, then you grew. You grew into your aura. You understand that?
I hear what you're saying, yes.
You can't grow into nothing. You can only grow into something. The aura that you grew into physically was your environment. You have to grow into that. So this is why your hands are on the ends of your arms and your feet are on the ends of your legs. It's because your aura has predetermined that pattern. This was tested. Robert O. Becker in the Body Electric. They took a graft and of a leg and they put it on a different part of the body. So that graft had the aura of the leg. And guess what? A new leg grew into that aura, but not in the place where the leg used to be, but where they put the graft. The cell tissue carries an energy field.
Interesting. I just sent a photo to Mark of my tomatoes growing roots. I didn't know how to put it in here, but now I understand that those parts of the tomato had the aura of the whole plant.
Right. And because you know this, when this YouTuber said, I have disproved the theory of the Kirlian photography, he didn't have Kirlian photography because this particular aura did not reflect the plasmatic field of the soul of the plant. And you, as a knowledge seeker, could catch him right off the bat. And so this is the point of these lessons. You don't know everything, and you don't know the latest research. But here's what you can tell. You can tell if someone's telling the truth or not. And one way you can tell is by looking at their soul. And another way you can tell is just by the knowledge that people talk about. And if I had this knowledge when I was in school, I would be thrown out of class because I would have, protested to the teacher. Oh no, that doesn't comply with, laws of the universe. Yeah, but this is the generally accepted method of teaching, the generally accepted knowledge, which has actually put a limitation on our knowledge. And so that extends to the speed of light, because you say, well, the speed of light is the fastest speed in physicality. In physicality. The physicality is a state. Now, what is the speed of light in the plasma state? This I can tell you. It will be constant, but it will have to be faster than the physical light. What are we talking about? We're talking about spirit light. We're talking about soul light. We're talking about Gans light. We're talking about nano light. We're talking about plasma light. Each energy state is a stable Magrav state. And within that stable Magrav state, it obeys the rules of energy transfer. And the energy transfer is via PM ticks, which are light, which are energy packs. These energy packs are love. All synonyms. But the one that we refer to constantly is light. And the light speed is constant in each state. But because the energy state is higher, then the light speed maximum is higher as well. Now you start to have an accounting for the difference in energy and mass. Because when you look at the equation of the speed of light, there is no reason for there to be more energy, and there's no reason for there to be more mass. But we know there is more energy, and we know there is more mass. And it's on the periodic table of elements, and the scientific community has worked that all out. And yet then they say, well, the speed of light is the maximum speed in physicality. But the maximum speed of light in the plasma reality is also the maximum speed, but it's a plasma light. It's not a physical light. And so when they say that the distance between here and there is so many light years, we are talking about physical light years. We are not talking about plasmatic light years. And that's why we're hanging on to, you know, internal combustion and rockets.
Okay, I've gotten Erm's picture. Can I share it? Maybe
I'm
you'd
going to
like
stop
make-
sharing.
You don't have to. I should be able to.
Yeah, I
make
do.
it. Okay, here we go. Maybe you'd like to make a comment, Erm. You sent me this picture just now. Let's see, Erm, are you still with us?
Hang on.
Okay, I think you
Can
can.
you hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, these were just tops actually. During the winter they got so long, I said that I can't sustain this till next spring, so I just took the tops off of those tops and started another batch. So these are actually the second times over where I
Wow.
grew those little hairs into roots.
Is that cheating? You already harvested the tomatoes the first time?
No, I harvested tomato plants.
Okay, okay.
But I was thinking, you know, when you grow tomatoes and you're supposed to pick off the side arms, the side branches,
The
you know, where
suckers on the
the
bottom?
suckers, right? You
Yeah.
could make more plants out of all those suckers.
Yeah, yeah, there's
Just
two
thinking of the
leaves.
practical implications.
Mhm, mhm. Any comment from anyone? And this is what I also wanted to bring this up, Alex, here. This is, we were talking about magnets, and a bit of your presentation was definitely about magnets and so on. The whole understanding of the world of creation comes in the dimension of understanding the work of the plasma, energy fields, connection of the fields. In fact, mankind has not made much strive to understand this, even though we play with them for centuries. We get the magnet and we play with it with another magnet, but we never understood the work of the fields, the sharing of the fields of the two magnets, the interaction of the fields of the magnets with their environment that allows such a position, what we call between the two attraction repulsion, what we call mag-rav positioning. If you really go back into the depth of it, we have not completed to understand the process of the matter state magnetic fields. And that is why we have a problem understanding the interaction of the fields of the plasma. So again, I don't think I fully understood the work of the magnet. We can't really see the fields of the magnet unless we put it under one of those, I'm not sure what they call them, but you can see the fields. Do you know what they're called, Alex, when you put a magnet on a certain device and it shows you its fields? Maybe not a magnetometer. I don't know if that's the right description of it. So we're still struggling through the work of the plasma or the work of the magnet in the matter state. And this makes it much more difficult for us to understand the work in the plasmatic state.
Well, in the physical state, Mark, we can put iron filings on a sheet and put a magnet underneath so we can see the field lines, the lines of force, right? The point I'm making is that if you remove that magnet, because of the low energy of the physical state, you will remove the field as well.
I got that. Okay.
So when we get into a plasma reactor, if you could do the same thing with the plasma reactor, So you take one of these rotating balls with the GANs in it, it will create a plasma field. And you can put the iron filings in that field and you will see that they will follow the same lines of force. But if you remove that reactor, you are leaving a plasmatic residue. And so that residue will remain behind.
And you were saying a lot of times field force, and that's because you were talking in the matter state. I know, Mr. Kesh, is in the plasmatic, we more refer to not a force because that's a movement of a physical object, but a strength of a field. And this is another understanding we have to be more certain of.
While the strength of the field is the mass, but that field has to position itself, and it will do so according to the force that it has in relationship to the force of the fields in the environment.
Okay. And that picture you showed with the brain, I mean, that is a half sphere.
Mind blowing?
Huh?
Mind blowing?
Yeah, a half sphere spaceship reactor, plasmatic spaceship.
Oh,
And
yes.
certainly the one you were, if you want to show that again, it's in one of your foils, but that's definitely a half sphere spaceship, plasmatic spaceship. And I think this is where we're going, this interaction inside the brain. In a way, he said there's no control system, but at the end he said your brain has a specific control system that puts the two together, the soul of physicality and the soul of the man, to synchronize, transfer, transmute their energies together.
Yes.
But I don't know if you took the screen back or not.
No, I haven't, but
okay. So we're all walking around with it. As he said, I put it right in front of your nose and you can't see it. I was thinking the other day, you know, he said he put it right in front of your nose. Well, if you look from the back of the skull towards the eyes, the soul is in front of the nose. So again, it might be another play on words in a way. I put it right in front of your nose, but you couldn't see it. That's from Mr. Kesh. He said that many, many times. But I think this is the part of the reactor, at least to, again, it's a very deep understanding. And perhaps when we start to work with it better, even though he did ask us to try and create a system within ourselves, I think, to fit into this sort of operation. And again, wondering when you're in the plasmatic state and when you're in the matter state and moving back and forth. Randy said the speed of light is also described mathematically in the pyramid's own dimensions. Speed of light 299 miles per second, 299,792,458 miles a second, coordinates of the Giza pyramid, 29,979 2458. Wow.
I found the slide. Mark, do you want to stop sharing?
Okay, here we go. You've got it.
Okay, I see what's going on. It's really affecting the, it really affects the screen. Okay.
We're seeing your screen, but we just see your name on it at this point.
Okay. Okay, I'm trying to send it down.
Okay, there it is. No, that wasn't the one. It was just the brain sort of floating in the air.
Oh, that one. Okay. Well,
That's the one. Definitely a half sphere spaceship reactor.
okay, I know. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we'll try and find it. Oh, it's not far away.
Okay. Yeah, just to show everyone what you're really walking around with and what you, again, it's for each one of us to sort of discover it, unravel it, start to use it. But the UFO will also come in with the universal community. He said these UFOs are beyond our own. No, it's not there. I thought it was from the side, but there it is. There you have it. There's your half sphere plasma spaceship right there. The one with the yeah. Mm-hmm. I think this is really a very close representation of what we're doing, even though the brain isn't flying per se, it's creating dimensions of fields and interactions to move in these energy packets of the soul, I think. Because when you dream, you're dreaming of the grandfather, but your body's in bed, so you couldn't possibly be physically with the grandfather. It's just the interaction of fields or creating that field within your own structure. And you're seeing it through the eyes. That's where the energy passes through. Or it's projected there. So yeah, very, again, we're quite novice at this, but I think we'll become more proficient. That's for sure as time goes on. I'm not saying we'll become experts. Mr. Kesh said to become a master at this takes a long, long time. And even traveling other parts of this universe, he said you'll get lost, you have to be brought back, and then probably processed for any sort of energy packages you may have picked up along the way, and so on and so forth. But that is a beautiful half sphere spaceship reactor, and we're all walking around with it. We just called it a brain. Okay, any other thoughts, questions, comments, objections? It's over past midnight, Alex, so.
Well, let me just thank everybody for allowing me to present. I hope you're finding these presentations interesting. You can see the challenge that we have. You know, most of us here are probably mature students, and you can see the challenge that the new students have. And so it's our responsibility to help them along the way, because it's very discouraging if they don't get the right grounding. But you know, we have to see the pattern and the flow of energy. And what the discussion really focused on today, which I'm really glad about, is the difference between the plasma science and the physical science. We really, really need to nail this down. And it was one of the hardest things that I've had to do over the last 4 years. And it was the motivation for a lot of the teachings that I did. And now we've come to the point where, you know, you bring up a little example like the hairs on the stem of a tomato plant, and we can discuss it intelligently. And you can see, you know, that how Ern transformed her plants, and how she's created an environment that was conducive to working with the plant's energy fields. So this is the payoff. This is what we've been striving to achieve. And it's not that difficult, except we have to unlearn a lot of things. So for the children, it's a lot easier for them, because they just have to learn the right way. And so they'll be catching up to us and passing us very, very quickly. And it just, we have to really make sure that we understand the difference between these different energy states. So thanks everybody for allowing me to present, and really
Thank
hopeful
you.
that you've all enjoyed the
We need
presentation.
as much input as we can possibly get. Okay, I'm going to take the screen, play the cash coin. There's still a lot of talk about coins and other things in the financial markets. But again, this is not a coin for speculation that it's going to be, you buy it for one price and next week it's 50 times that price. And then the following week it's worth nothing. So it's not that type of coin for speculation, but to be part of the banking system once the Cash Foundation establishes this bank, and it'll be exchanged for products and services within the foundation, which they are going to be enormous, it sounds like, not counting the wellness, the shelter, the feeding, the energy, but a variety of plasmatic products in the 20 to 30,000 number of products to be in the store. I'm going to share the screen, Alex. We're going to play the cash coin, and then we're going to play the final disclaimer, and the meeting will end. Any other comments, thoughts, questions? Someone's holding back what they'd like to share. If not, then we'll go ahead with this. Thank you again, Alex, and all the knowledge seekers. We're all gaining more knowledge, and this is what Mr. Kesh is. We may not have the complete picture, but we're certainly gaining knowledge day by day, week by week, and so on. And many of the systems that are being developed, that we're helping to develop, we'll be able to use in the future, hopefully as well. Again, it all depends how long you want to stay and enjoy the physicality. Okay, so thank you all. Again, one more time, any other thoughts, questions, comments?
Yeah, I had one more thing to report, but if I don't want to
Go right
make
ahead.
everybody stay too late. Last night I had a dream, and when I came to the end of the dream, somehow I was still totally in the dream state, but I knew in my dream that I was going to wake up. And from my dream state, I was trying to imagine what it would be like to be awake. and I thought I liked my dream state better.
Yes.
But then finally I did wake up, but it was quite a lengthy process to get back to the normal, quote, normal awake state from the dream state. And still for a while, the dream state was much more vivid than the awake state.
Especially if it was a good one, right? You really want to go back and continue with it.
I don't know what the content was very much, other than that it was an awareness of dreaming.
I would like to add something to that and say, I know exactly what you're talking about. I went through the same experience for the last 2 days. And I know that you were on the session at the end of the month.
Yeah.
And I was very impressed with that session. And I think that is one of the results, for us, where I'm just alluding to the comment that Mr. Kesh made, that we could better remember our dreams and actually be aware of the two different states at the same time. And I think that's what you just described, and I'm
right.
And I'm reinforcing that because I experienced the same thing. So I'm really glad you brought that up.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, then, you know what I think I'm going to do? We're going to play two things. One, they're both only about a minute long, but this is our rough cut of some of the panels. We're not quite finished with it, that we're producing just to show a number of the public teachings. Ed has put this together more or less. We've commented and helped him, critiqued it, and so on. But this is a rough cut, let's say, of a final product that will be coming